To be honest, there's a tube strike, it's raining, I get it. But it's gonna be a great day, I think. Starting with this session, which is gonna be really interesting. This is Tammuz Dubnov. He's the founder and CTO of Autonomy AI, doing some really cool stuff over there, and we're gonna hear a bit about it. Anyone a horror movie fan in the room? No? Kind of unlucky, because this is about when PMs start writing code. Over to you, Tammuz.
Okay, pleasure to be here. That was the first time I got introduced as a horror story, so that was nice, a little refreshing. All right, we will be talking about PMs writing code, but that's not the true essence of this. The essence of this is organizations want to become AI native. How is this a part of it? And specifically, how can you start measuring it as you try and push your organization to be more AI native and make those adoptions that are needed. So before we start, the problems that hopefully not, but likely we all have. Anybody here have had awkward conversations with the CFO, CEO about AI spendings? No? Wow. Okay, I have those like on bi-weekly, like every other day I get asked the same question. Okay, good for you guys. You're in a better place than I am. Anybody here have PMs and designers opening PRs? Cool. Okay, that's solid. That's a great place to be. Next question. Anybody here know the merge rate on those PRs? No. Do you guys know if the PRs they're opening are meaningful or crap, for lack of better words? Okay, so that's gonna be a part of the focus today. Everybody wants to be AI native. If you don't want to be AI native, I'm not sure why you're in this room. If you don't know what AI native is, then just open up basically any news channel. But when I ask people, okay, what does AI native mean to you? Almost nobody can define it, at least not to me. Do you guys know what AI native means? No? Do you guys know what harness means? Those are the big buzzwords. When I ask, nobody knows. Everybody wants to have a harness. Everybody wants to be AI native. When I ask them, what does that mean? They can't really answer. But the answer, or the semi-answer I do get is, well, being AI native means that our PMs, our designers, even our QAs, more people open pull requests. And that's somewhat true. But in my sight, that is the symptom. That's not what being AI native really means. So I'll give you my definition. For me, being AI native means that the person that cares, the person that has the authority to make the decision, is also the person that can do the work. That basically AI collapses the gap, collapses the handover. You, as a person that cares about X in the organization, has the authority to decide about X in the organization, can actually do the work by having agents execute. Why that is really impactful and why that actually speeds up an organization is because the bottleneck for a while now has not been how fast can I write code. The bottleneck has been the handoff. Hey, as a PM I have an idea, designer please make a Figma, okay let's talk about it a week after, let's see if we're aligned. Hey, I have this spec that I'm happy with. Dear developer, let's factor it into your sprint, get to it this sprint, next sprint, whenever we can work it in. Now that idea has waited a sprint or two, and now I get to actually see it. And now I need to do the review, and we're gonna do pixel perfect iterations, and we're gonna notice that you got this wrong in the ticket, we're gonna notice that I got this wrong in the ticket, and we're gonna start iterating and doing those really long handover processes that slow down the velocity and actually choke it. So even if people can write code really quickly, it doesn't mean that the features go out to users faster. And what you get when you do move towards AI native is that the people who care can execute with agents almost immediately, can do those iterations on the spot, and then when they are happy with it, they can send it off to a developer to review, and you basically have coupled in design review, you've coupled in product review, all before the developer even hears a word of what the feature is supposed to be. And that's what it means. It means collapsing stuff that can be days or weeks to frankly minutes. And what that means at an individual level is that everybody gets an upgrade. We have PMs that don't really care about specs, they care about features. Well, now they can actually implement and experience the features and tune them themselves. We get engineers that maybe don't care about the UI, UX, at least a lot of the engineers I know. They care much more about the system, the refactoring, how the components are built, how the dependencies are mapped out, and now they can start working on those. And we have the senior engineers that frankly want to work in architecture and solve bigger and harder problems. And suddenly with AI native organizations, everybody can go and focus on the stuff where they really matter. And frankly, that's the stuff that they really care about. And you can see that the data is moving that way as well. People are not hiring more workers to do more work. They're hiring more people to make decisions. And you can see that the rate of hiring product managers is going up much faster than developers that are frankly not going up. Because as organizations become more AI native, as they move faster, the bottleneck is the decision makers. And you want the people, frankly the PMs, the designers, the people that can make that decision that will impact the user. Now, in the rush to become AI native, some people are doing it wrong, and it can be really, really expensive. Everybody heard of Uber and what's going on there? Okay, so this came out just, I think 3 or 4 days ago. Uber has increased their AI spend since 2024 by 6x. Now that 6x growth was completely used within 4 months. They are out of AI budget for the rest of the year. And when you ask them what the impact is of trying to go like fully AI native, everybody get all the tokens you want, that's like the awkward CFO conversation that you guys have magically not had, you will get an answer saying AI costs are getting harder to justify. People want more and more tokens. But me as a business leader, I'm not seeing how there's a link to actually moving faster on features. And that's the really, really big gap. That just throwing more LLM compute that's not fixed the organization. You actually want to move to be AI native and give the people that can decide the ability to execute. Microsoft, kind of similar phenomena. They gave everybody Cloud Code, and now they're taking it away. Because just giving Cloud Code to more and more people in an organization is a wonderful way to burn money. It is not the right way to speed up the org. And now if we actually want to see like what is all of these, the token budget, where is the spending going to, somebody's done the deep dive by analyzing over 2,400 companies and how they use AI. And you can see from any $100 that you spend on AI, only $18 actually goes to meaningful code that actually gets shipped to users. A lot of it goes to stuff that gets reworked, bugs that the AI also generated, and you get this wonderful loop of spending more and more money on LLMs because of the LLM providers and basically how the model is trained. Now, it's not a sad story. Some people are doing a great job. Shopify is doing a great job in becoming more AI native, but the focus is not necessarily on developers. It's not about giving them higher limits on Cloud Code. It's about empowering the rest of the organization. And again, the people that can decide in their domain, the ability to execute in their domain. So you'll see here, Shopify kind of went all in, thousands of cursor licenses. And when they actually measured the stuff that gets shipped from those non-technical individuals, how much of it is valuable, how much of it needs to be written, they saw that 50% just gets accepted. It means that the quality is so high that the work getting done by those non-engineers can actually be merged as is and doesn't go to a developer that has to go and patch it endlessly. And you'll see even the VP of engineering, like very clearly says, the faster growing groups are not the engineers. They're everybody else that deeply cares about the organization and now can actually impact it. So if we try and break down the wrong ways and the right ways, I'll give you what I see as the wrong ways. If you just give bigger limits and more LLM spendings to the same developers on the same tasks, you will get a bigger budget, but you will get developers that aren't really interested in the tasks that you've given them because it's the same as before. And at least from my experience, developers that work on tasks that they're not interested in the agentic era will just hand it off to an agent. And they will let the agent check itself and notice there's an issue and fix itself and notice there's another issue and do effectively huge token consumption in a single session for a bug that the engineer, had they cared, would have probably seen me like, oh, no, you went the wrong direction, go this way. But the disinterested engineers will just hand it off and let the agent loop endlessly because they don't really feel the token spend. You will give, another way to undersell it is you will give PMs and designers prototyping tools so they can prototype faster and they can create potentially Figmas faster but that doesn't solve the big bottleneck that we talked about with the handover. It just gets them to create a Figma faster and wait for the devs for longer. It's like the army saying in the US, hurry up and wait. They're just going to hurry up to wait. And lastly, we've seen a lot of organizations give Claude Code to everybody. Now, Claude Code in the name is the word code. People that don't know how to really look at code don't really know what to do with Claude Code. And giving it to PMs and designers is a great way for them to go to your devs every other day to say, hey, help me set up the environment, something broke. Or for them to open PRs that are thousands of lines and total nonsense, and basically ways for them to increase the PR fatigue that your dev team is already feeling. And now the right ways to do all this is actually take the tools that are tuned for that type of user. So Claude Code is a wonderful tool for developers. There are tools for PMs and designers. We explicitly focus on one as well. Autonomy AI is a tool for those non-technical individuals. You move the person that cares to be the person that does the work. So pixel perfect work that you put on a developer that doesn't really care about how it looks is stuff that's going to eat your token budget needlessly because they don't really care. And lastly, you do not let go of your guards. We talk to organizations that have made a big jump to be AI native, and then we go top down. So we talk to executives and leaders in organizations, and then on calls, they will find out new features in front of clients that don't match the product. Not visibly, not functionality, but everybody moves so fast and tries to be AI native and runs forward that all of your guards, the stuff that engineering principals have put in place over years of experience, they suddenly disappear. So it is really important to keep those in place. That's your quality assurance. That's the way to make sure that AI doesn't run forward and break your product and take it in a totally different direction than what you intended. I'm not going to talk about it in this talk because there's not enough time, but personally I've adopted a methodology in our organization that we call Plan, Merge, Polish, and how you can keep those guards in while also moving quickly in terms of code velocity without getting conflicts left and right. But the key here is same tools, different play. The focus is on getting the people who care the tools to execute. And all of that confidence in enabling those non-technical individuals to touch a code base that can be brownfield, can be extremely complicated, extremely legacy, that confidence comes from the harness. So again, for the harness buzzword that not everybody knows, the well Hashimoto defined it is basically a harness means that you saw the agent making a mistake and you make it unfeasible for the agent to make the same mistake again. You put in some sort of wall to see that the next time that happened, the agent gets automatic feedback. Hey, you did this wrong, correct it. And the important thing here is that the harness needs to adapt. A mistake is made, a mistake is realized. The harness needs to adapt to prevent that mistake from happening again. So it's not something that's supposed to be handheld. It's something that's supposed to grow and evolve organically with more usage and over time. So I'll tell you some of our principles as we do a lot of harness engineering internally for our tool. Everybody here works in an organization with a code base, often a massive code base. So you need the harness, you need the agents to actually know what the code is. They need to understand it. They need to onboard themselves. They do not need to depend on a developer to tell them what to do. They need to be able to communicate with the user. They can't depend on the user to anchor and say, in this file, in this span of lines, let's work on it. They need to understand the product level language and what that actually translates to in the code. They need to manage really long sessions and keep the context fresh. They need to be able to check their own work to get automatic feedback loops and higher quality. With that, they also need to know what good means. And of course, they need to improve. That's the key part of a harness. So we personally put a lot of emphasis on all of this, but in particular, when working with non-technical individuals, you need somebody to own the code and read the code. That's on the agent. You don't want to translate all those code constraints to the product every single time you talk to them. You want the agent to just know that inherently and factor it in. And you want the agent to check itself constantly. There's nothing worse than an overconfident agent. And finally, you want to learn not just from an individual session, but from all of your users in parallel, so that the growth is actually exponential and truly accumulative. And a question we often get is, that sounds amazing, but I'm a snowflake, my code is really difficult, setting it up is not actually going to work. And the answer is, well, frankly, we've never not been able to make it work. Everything is feasible, you just have to go about it the right way. Since we're talking about non-technical individuals, they care much more about the user-facing. So maybe if you're super complicated microsystem architecture backend, it's not feasible to set up for them every time. To focus more on the front end. We can run setups that are crazy monorepo, NX, multi-repo with like sibling libraries that need to be compiled so the agent can actually see it. And we've dealt with everything in terms of security, from like secrets to access private repositories and artifactories that contain like the core libraries that you need to actually run it. So everything is feasible. Frankly, agents can manage everything now. We've not seen a case that it's not manageable. But it is really important to say the people that care can't do work that they're not really authorized to do. So there is very much a line in the sand. The line in the sand is engineers most definitely have their place, but it's in making the judgment calls on the actual engineering decisions, architecture decisions, the DB, the backend, and having them focus again on the stuff that they care about more. Whereas the non-technical individuals can focus on the user-facing changes, whether that's tiny stuff like copy, to layout, to new features, to getting UX right. And what that actually more or less boils down to is they can do the user-facing, the UX work, and you get your engineers to focus on what really matters, all the IP. Now this line sounds really nice and potentially obvious. It is not so easy. It is more than expected that you will fail. The merge rate we're going for is not 100. And knowing the line between a task that involves backend and doesn't involve backend is not all that clear, especially to somebody non-technical that really wants to make an impact. So I'll give you an example from us. We had this PR and we closed it. The designer, or I think here it was the PM, did a lot of work. The PR ended up being a little over 1,000 lines. A new feature, they wanted to add like an images to a very specific part of the site, so if somebody jumps through the versions, they can see visually what the other versions were. And the agent succeeded, and when they did a product review, it worked beautifully, exactly like they wanted it. And as soon as it went to the developer said, oh, we're not gonna merge this. And that was because the agent made everything server-side and stored the images there, and basically if the user came back the next day, the images would be gone. Whereas the developer said, oh, we can't store this until we have an internal discussion to decide how we want to store them. Is it going to be in a DB, or are we putting it in a bucket? I don't even know the answers to this, so there's no way we're going to go with what the agent decided for the PM. And again, that's healthy. For us, that just meant this conversation got sped up. The developers talked about it the next day. The feature was in, I think, the week after. And what the developer did is they took this branch, took all the front end, all the UX, and they just changed the backend. So not a sad tale, but the expectations shouldn't be, hey, 100%. If a PM opens a PR, don't go and be mad at the developers for not merging it. You want them to be that guard. So now the thing that really matters for any data scientist in the room is how do you measure it? I'll tell you how we do it across the hundreds of orgs and thousands of PRs that get opened with us on a weekly, monthly basis. So the first thing to track is, frankly, the count of the pull request. How many are opened by non-technical individuals? And ideally by which individual? So you know that everybody's actually getting enabled and impactful. We have seen places where some non-technicals, I know PMs are more confident opening PRs, some are more hesitant. You want everybody to actually feel comfortable, and you can track that just by the count. But beyond it, you want to make sure that you're not adding PR fatigue by opening nonsense PRs. And that's where the merge rate comes in. From our numbers, just so you're familiar, an average non-technical contributor in our organization in a quarter opens about 50 PRs. Their merge rate is about 74%, which means that 1 out of 4, they accidentally overstepped, and that's okay. That's not PR fatigue. That's totally fine. That it's a level where we still have a lot of trust between the PRs they open and the dev team that reviews them. And lastly, you also want to measure how much extra work you're adding, not just in terms of PR reviews. Sometimes developers will need to do follow-up work because the agent doesn't know maybe some future roadmap plans and refactors that are intended or whatnot. And there, how we do it is we measure from PRs that are opened and merged, how many get merged without any dev interfering, without them pushing more commits to fix, change, adjust. And again, for us, that is 84%. So 84% of the PRs merged, generated by non-technical individuals, simply get merged, which is a way to make sure that you are not increasing the burden on the dev team, not just from a PR fatigue, but from a task perspective. The moral of the story, the point of being AI native is actually democratizing authorship so that the person that is accountable, the person that has the authority, is the person that can do the work without being dependent on a bunch of other individuals in the org and hoping that they do their work or waiting for them to do the work. And again, that's where the velocity and the disconnect between spending more on AI but not feeling a faster feature shipment, that's where the gap is from. And frankly, all you need is an OS on your code base to make this possible. We're happy to talk to you about how we do it, but you do want something that is absolutely coupled in your code base to enable all those non-technical individuals without giving them technical nature or cloud code and lots of code to look at. And that's it. Thank you.
Thank you so much. We will have about 5 minutes for questions. If anyone likes to ask something, okay. We'll start over here.
Hi. The metrics, do you create your own tool to get those metrics? Because you had the last one, which is number of PRs that has 0 dev touches, right? If you're creating lots of PRs, how do you actually know which ones are being touched by engineering? And have you automated that? Do you use an off-the-shelf tool?
We look at it ourselves. Our system looks at every PR who the author is. Frankly, the author shows up as like the Autonomy AI bot, but in it, there's a trace of the user that authored it. And then we look at the commit history before it was merged. So you know the last push made by the Autonomy AI bot. And then you see if more people actually push stuff to it that change the code, not just like merging or rebasing. So that's how you can track it pretty easily.
Yeah, I was wondering if you also see this moving the other way as well. So you sort of like moving the PMs more to the right. Do you have the engineers moving more into the PM UI feature space as well?
So a few things. It's interesting that both kind of move in both directions. One is, I'll talk a little bit about our process with plan, merge, polish. We call it kind of pump. Yes, developers want to move fast. As such, they don't want to wait for product decisions, UX decisions. They want to be able to, hey, I built this feature end-to-end. It works, at least from my perspective. Let me get it in. The way we're seeing, or we work, and we see some organizations work as well, is basically that they let the developer make those decisions. We depend pretty heavily on feature flags. So we say, developer, go for it, make all your product decisions. Everything is feature flagged. Why? Because we need to be able to merge it quickly. Otherwise, it accumulates conflicts at a really rapid rate just because of the dev velocity. And then we let the people who care about UX, nuances of the feature, even QA, they can open follow-up pull requests to clean it up. So yes, we most definitely push our developers to make the decision and just get the feature out. And we feel very comfortable with opening follow-up requests. So like a feature may be like 3 or 4 pull requests, and that's totally fine.
Hi, do you have any rollback mechanisms for these features built in the system, or do you just do it outside? If something got merged, it blows up production. Do you have any automated ways to handle it?
We do depend on organizations that have like a CI to some extent. The good and the bad is the agents model your code base really deeply, including all your coding standards, the component library, how you set up the environment. And we will write the same way that you write. So that means we saw organizations that write with feature flags. The agents automatically output with feature flags. Organizations that don't have that practice, we will not introduce that practice. On a more troubling note, organizations that don't have a lot of tests, we see the agents don't really add tests because that's not the practice. We're going to add like a toggle on to force it anyway.
You're not opinionated, you just follow the existing practice.
No, the harness is super lean to adapt your practices. That's what we saw that the dev organizations prefer.
You mentioned a few times trying to avoid like a PR fatigue on the side of engineering. Have you found any good ways that you can use to visualize or communicate the amount of time developers are spending on those things? Because we find definitely as product starts to write more features and push more PRs in, the dev teams end up slowing down because they're spending all the time reviewing things. That's quite hard for us to prove.
I have the same challenges internally in my R&D and in clients as well. So a few things. One, when we developed the system, we optimized the agent to output as few lines of code. The agent does this by optimizing reuse, and we have a bunch of ways that it can model the code base and dependency to actually find the components and reuse them properly. So we saw that helps. The smaller PRs, the less PR fatigue. The issue with PRs, if you just go to the pull request page, is they all look the same. So what we did internally is we now have an agent that every PR that's open, it labels the risk level and the size. So you as a developer that see like the 9 pull requests you need to view, you will see that like 3 of those are low risk small. You will see that 1 is like extra large, and you basically have like an easy way to manage it yourself. And it doesn't become as overwhelming as, oh my God, I have 9 PRs. It's like, oh no, I have like 3 super small ones, 2 medium, 1 extra large. I'm going to put a lot of effort there. They also factor in the risk level and how much like attention and effort they put into it. So we saw that that's been one, like an easier way for them to gauge. And 2, for the team leads, they now factor that in. So when a new PR is open, they see the amount of load on each developer, factoring in, again, size and risk, and make sure that they try and spread the burden.
That is unfortunately all the time we have for questions, but Tammuz and team are here. They have a booth in the exhibition area, so highly recommend you grab them for a chat at some point today. Let's give Tammuz a round of applause.